Hi, Jonathan York from Bay Financial Partners, looking at the investment markets. Again, another very interesting week for President Trump as he's sort of finished now his European tour and obviously the meeting with President Putin. Really was a very sort of strange sort of week. Trump really went on the offensive with supposedly, his allies, sort of Europe, the UK, Germany. He really was pretty critical, and also NATO as well, really pretty critical of, supposedly the allies. Which has drawn some interesting comments. Donald Tusk from the EU sort of came out and sort of had a sort of veiled sort of threat that Trump really should be a little bit more careful the way he actually addresses his allies, because really they're sort of falling by the wayside and really has very, very few left that he hasn't upset. Obviously get to the meeting in Helsinki with President Putin and Trump, in really quite a bizarre sort of press conference, actually came out and criticized his own intelligence services and forces, and said that President Putin was pretty strong and adamant that Russia had not meddled in the US election, and he believed him, and his intelligence services were wrong in their assumptions. He then went on, obviously, to criticise Special Counsel Mueller in the investigation, and then really turned into a bit of a debacle and sort of circus, really. But probably what was more interesting was, obviously, you expected the Democrats to come out, and heavily criticise him, but also many people within the Republican Party as well, his own party, and also as well, quite interesting as well, sort of Fox News, which really has been a pretty strong supporter of, Trump, and that's one of the few news channels that he hasn't accused of having sort of fake news, has come out and slammed him as well. You then fast forward one day, and actually he's come out and said that possibly Russia did meddle in the elections. But that's sort of quite convenient that he's now back in the US, doesn't have to face Putin face to face, and most analysts and commentators are coming out, there was one clear winner in the Helsinki meeting, and it wasn't Donald Trump. Now, if you look at that and see how that's sort of translating into US markets, really pretty much sort of ignoring it, as they have done with a lot of sort of the sort of news and, sort of political circus that has become, the White House and the Trump presidency. Earnings are still pretty strong. You're looking at a pretty strong economy, and, it's pretty much sort of business as usual. Indeed, Fed Governor Powell's come out, and is talking about, it's a pretty strong and robust economy, and that potentially means that, the Fed is still on track for a further rate hike in September and one more in December. It's now just going to be interesting to see how the midterms play out, because, if they do go pretty badly for the Republicans, we're now just about 2 years away from the national conventions for the 2020 election. And that could pose some issues if the Republicans don't do particularly well in the midterms. Is Trump then sort of a lame duck president? Is just sort of waiting really for his sort of end of his term to come through? Or will he get the nomination to fight the 2020 election? Also as well, yet to see any sort of Democrat candidate come up. Really, they start to really need to start to get in the running with only 2 years to go. But really the key to the 2020 presidential election may well just be the consumers. And, if they're sort of feeling confident, could be very interesting time. Because certainly at present out there, consumer confidence is pretty good in the US. Why wouldn't it be? You say you've got a strong economy, you've got record low unemployment. The only thing you haven't really got is obviously a lot of wage inflation coming through, but that potentially starts to sort of creep through in the next sort of 3 to 6 months. Obviously, the one thing that could really sort of just derail the US economy is obviously this potential trade war. That is still sort of bubbling away in the background. Again, most analysts and economists still expect it to be a relatively short term, and Trump just using it as sort of a bit of leverage and a bit of negotiating powers to get relevant parties to the table to negotiate a better trade deal for the US. Obviously, the big question is, will that actually happen? Interesting to note, oil has come off pretty aggressively. It's back from sort of $74 back to around 68 in WTI. Saudi has potentially sort of turned on the taps, and that has had the initial sort of short-term reaction of obviously taking prices down. But again, it's a relatively sort of short-term fix. Saudi can't keep on pumping, at sort of record levels, and it's just going to be interesting to see how this sort of plays through. Certainly there is a little bit of pent-up demand out there, and potentially as well the sort of geopolitical issues, especially with the Iran sanctions and a little bit of supply disruption as well. It could quite easily take oil back to $75 or $80 quite easily. Prime Minister May has managed to survive a pretty sort of crucial Brexit vote in terms of the trade bill going forward. Managed to defeat that, and it's sort of one small battle won. There's still a number to win sort of going forward, and again it's just going to be interesting to see how this sort of plays through, because clearly the clock is ticking out there, and really need to get something sort of hard and concrete sort of settled by really sort of September, October, to give the relevant parliament time to sort of debate and ratify whatever agreement comes up. Just as a note, sort of quite interesting as well, during Trump's visit to the UK, he suggested to Prime Minister May that she should sue the EU. Here in New Zealand, it's sort of business as usual. The housing market, interestingly, has sort of come off the board a little bit. And that's maybe taken a little bit of pressure off. Certainly, the Reserve Bank is still talking about no rate increase until sort of at least mid to late 2019. We're looking at maybe 15 months before we start to see any movement in rates. But really going to be interesting to see how that does sort of play through, given the fact that the US is still expected to have a couple more rate increases by the end of this year, and potentially, could quite easily see 4 rate hikes in the US by sort of this time next year. That would obviously put quite a bit of pressure on global rates, and it'd just be interesting to see if New Zealand then doesn't sort of get dragged, sort of kicking and screaming really, to increase interest rates. Just on this KiwiSaver as well, you should be getting your tax credits in the next sort of week or so. It's maybe not a bad time if you haven't already reviewed it. Just have a little look and make sure you are in this right sort of fund and right sort of risk profile. And again, if you are unsure on that, give us a call on 0800 867 323. Now, as always, if you are looking for income, there are plenty of options available out there. and give us a call on 0800 867 323 or go to the website www.bayfinancialpartners.co.nz for lots of interesting articles. We look forward to speaking to you soon.